Hello, so this is our presentation on wildlife and natural resources in the United States, Botswana, and South Africa. This presentation was created by myself, Dean, and Cole as well. So my portion of the presentation was on the wildlife in Botswana, South Africa, and the United States. I chose specifically to focus on some of the more prominent mammals in the area, as well as a few smaller things such as different frogs. Um, So looking at this, there are obviously I cannot capture all of the wildlife in all of these areas. So I did try to narrow it down to some things that are more prominent within the area, and some of these do overlap as well. So first in the United States, we have elk, we have bald eagles, which is obviously our national bird. We have grizzly bears, manatees, which I will circle back to later, polar bears, the American alligator, bison, white-tailed deer, which are incredibly common, moose, we have possums, gray squirrels, and raccoons, which are incredibly common in the United States. And then we also have some endangered species. So the endangered species that I chose to highlight are the Florida panther, the Florida manatee, and the red wolf. So with the Florida panther, there are currently only around 1 to 200 left. So they were previously hunted and considered to be somewhat of a nuisance. Their main death cause is habitat loss and vehicle collisions. They actually used to reside over a majority of the United States, but now they mainly reside in Florida. The Florida manatee, so climate change has led to a lot of fluctuations in water temperature, as we know. And this has led to a lack of seagrass, which is manatees' main food source, as well as many deadly algae blooms that ends up affecting them. This has caused the death of over 1,000 manatees just in the year 2021 alone. And then lastly, the red wolf. So there are only around 15 to 17 approximated red wolves left in the wild. There are more in conservation programs. I'm actually from Akron, where our zoo has a red wolf conservation and rehabilitation program. So the population did drop from 100 to less than 20 in a 6-year time span, so it was a rapid decline. So next, going on to the Botswana wildlife, they have aardvarks, buffaloes, cheetahs, antelope, crocodiles, specifically African crocodiles, elephants, hippos, leopards, hyenas, rhinos, lions, and zebras. So some of these are a part of the Big Five, as they're referred to. So I'll reference that a little bit later when we're looking at South Africa. But I did choose to go with some of the larger animals just because these are the most prominent. When like looking at the area overall and looking from an outside scope. And so some endangered species that exist within the area are the black rhinoceros, brown hyenas, and the black-footed cat. So it was previously believed that black rhinoceros would be extinct by the year 2024. Luckily, we are not at that point yet. They are still around. They are just extremely endangered. So they have been hunted down due to their horns, which some people believe to have medicinal properties. And then brown hyenas, these animals are frequently killed by locals as they are considered pests, in a similar way that foxes and coyotes will break into farms in our areas and kill animals. The same is true with brown hyenas. And then the black-footed cat. So despite the fact that this is the smallest African cat breed, these cats are often hunted for their meat. And they're also easy targets for larger prey, and they're incredibly susceptible to being struck by vehicles due to their low visibility on roads. So looking at the South Africa wildlife, this is where I mentioned the Big Five. So the Big Five is considered to be lions, leopards, rhinos, elephants, and buffalo. So those things are prominent in both places. So I did choose to leave them out of this one, but just know that there is overlap between those two, and there are overlap between a couple of the animals on here as well. So we have caracals, which are a large cat in South Africa. We have South African penguins, which I was incredibly excited to learn that there were penguins. We have a great white shark, which regularly migrates to South Africa. We have dolphins. There are a couple types of breed of dolphin in South Africa. We have wildebeest, blue cranes, which are also an endangered species in South Africa. We have the bontebok, which is a different type of antelope. We have the Cape grizzbok, which is actually a very small animal. We have horseshoe bats, jackals, vultures, which are also an endangered animal, and ostriches. So some of the endangered species in South Africa, I chose to look at these ones just because they were a little bit more narrowed down. So the riverine rabbit, this animal has an estimated 250 or less remaining mature animals in the wild. So the numbers are very quickly dwindling. The picker's gills reed frog. The species is now only found in small isolated areas in South Africa. It used to be more widespread. Its dwindling status is related to the decreasing wetlands and mass urbanization that just has slowly spread. Even if it's not on a large scale, the urbanization of the area has led to decreased wetlands, which has contributed to the endangered status of this animal. And then lastly, a golden mole. So these animals are one of the most endangered species in South Africa. Their habitat has mainly been put at risk due to the mining in South Africa.
So I'm talking about conservation in Botswana, South Africa, and the United States. Um, land use for land use for conservation in Botswana, about 17% is used for national parks and reserves, and then another 22% is used for wildlife management areas, which is like strictly regulated hunting, game ranching, farming, live capture, and photographic safaris. And in South Africa, around 4% is used for national reserves, and then 3.5% is used for national parks. With the United States, about 12% is used permanently protected zones. Here are maps that show all that. So you can see Botswana has big like chunks out of it strictly for wildlife and conservation. South Africa has a few, and the United States. Alaska has the highest percentage of protected land. And conservation funding, Botswana and South Africa are pretty similar. They have a heavy focus on ecotourism for revenue. For example, the Wildlife Conservation Policy of 1986, or WCP, is the main policy on wildlife conservation in Botswana. And their key objectives are to encourage development of commercial wildlife industry, which provides economic opportunities like jobs and income for local or rural population. And then the United States has a federal budget designated for conservation and doesn't rely too heavily on ecotourism like Botswana and South Africa do. Botswana and South Africa's conservation focuses are also pretty similar. It has more of a focus on animals, while in the United States, you see a lot of national parks that are like showcasing the landscape rather than the animals there.
All right, so here's natural resources for South Africa, Botswana, and United States compared. Diamonds are the world. The Botswana is the world's leader in quantity and quality of diamonds, and it brings in most of the GDP's revenue and is heavily mined. Also, copper and nickel are highly exported, along with coal. There's large coal reserves, though these are less exploited compared to diamonds, copper, and nickel. Botswana's natural resources continued. So there's also livestock and agriculture. Apart from minerals, Botswana's other significant natural resource is livestock, particularly cattle farming, which is a key livelihood for many Botswana. Also, there's water resources such as the Okavango Delta, which is a unique inland delta. It is a vital water resource supporting a rich diversity of wildlife and ecosystems. South Africa natural resources. So in South Africa, gold is famously rich and is also famously rich in precious metals and materials. They also have diamonds too. I mean, they're basically on top of each other. There's also the mineral chromium and platinum. And there's large coal reserves too. Continue for South Africa. There's also iron and manganese. Apart from those minerals, this country has substantial deposits of iron ore and manganese, which are important for its steel industry. There's also vineyards, which means there's lots of fertile land that leads to productions of lots of wine. For the United States natural resources, minerals. The U.S. has a diverse range of mineral resources, including gold, silver, copper, and uranium. There's also lots of natural gas. The U.S. is rich in fossil fuel resources, including coal, natural gas, and oil, as you can see on the screen. It's one of the world's largest oil producers and has vast shale gas reserves. Forest. The U.S. has extensive forest resources, providing timber as a major natural resource. The United States natural resources continue. Livestock and agriculture. The U.S. is a global leader in the production of corn, soybeans, and cattle. The U.S. also has vast amounts of different types of lands, which is helpful. Lots of farming. If you've ever driven through Missouri and Oklahoma, there's nothing but farms. Water resources. The U.S. has significant freshwater resources, including the Great Lakes, which are among the world's largest freshwater bodies. I don't recommend going to Oklahoma.
And here's my works cited. Thank you.